Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 63 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Hilary Giovale, author of the recently published book Becoming a Good Relative, calling white settlers towards truth, healing, and repair. As Maya Angelou famously said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." Now is our time to do better. To step forward courageously with open hearts, humility and perseverance, to do the work to say, "This stops now," to play our part in healing and repairing the past, to ensure a shift of path for our future. In this deeply thought-provoking conversation and through her book, Hilary gently encourages us to reflect on our society and our ancestry, to understand the two-sided coin of white privilege and white peril, alongside the far-reaching impacts of colonisation that have imprinted trauma on Indigenous societies around the world for millennia. She shares the wisdom she has gained over her almost decade-long journey that started with a revelation that held such guilt and shame it literally brought her sobbing to her knees in the snow. Through cultivating a way of being that shows up with a generous heart, listens and is responsive to what is asked and not what you believe is wanted, she has been blessed by an incredible diversity of people who have generously guided her journey and allowed her to offer their wisdom to us. She goes on to demonstrate the roots for repair, partly through addressing the continued systemic divide that is stubbornly resilient in our societies and is evident in the fact that only 0.04% of philanthropic dollars in the US benefit Indigenous communities, but also through powerful private ceremonies offering us space for reflection, apology and forgiveness. My hope is that this episode sparks conversation, that you listen with kindness and compassion as I do my best to hold space for these often confronting and challenging conversations that offer us all a place of beginning. I invite you to please share this conversation and join me as we take a first step together and then a second to play our part in raising awareness and then in taking action to unravel and repair the legacy we have inherited. But also remember, we have the power to redirect the future trajectory of our society's evolution as we come to understand and embody the fact that we are all connected. Welcome, Hilary, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I am really delighted to welcome you as a guest. You've got an incredible book out called Becoming a Good Relative, which we'll be discussing. But just to get us started, I always ask my guests to share a little bit about their nature story. So just anything that you'd like to share about how nature's been a part of your life, either in the past or more recently, would be lovely to get us started.
Oh, thank you so much, Fiona. I'm so glad to be with you today. And when you ask me about nature story, the first thing that comes into my mind is the forest that's very close to my house. I'm very lucky to live near a ponderosa pine forest in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is in the southwestern part of the United States. And it's on Hopi, Havasupai, Dene, Apache, Pueblo land, among other nations. And I love to go out in the woods all around this region. And we live at the base of a mountain that is sacred to all the indigenous peoples of this region. And she is this just towering, majestic figure in the landscape here. It's just incredible to see her. And right now, it's late March and she is covered with snow.
Oh, wow.
And it's just majestic to behold her. But mostly because there's snow on the mountain right now, I go down in the forest in the lower areas, and I have spent so much time in those woods, walking, being with my dog, sitting on the land, lying down on the land, sometimes talking to the trees, sometimes listening, watching the birds, watching the squirrels, and it just feels like this home to me, like a like a home of ancestors or home of teachers in the woods.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love spending time amongst trees. I think they have such a amazing energy just in themselves. But when you throw in this amazing cultural landscape that you're part of now and you find yourself in, yeah, I can imagine just the energy of that place is just something else and truly special to experience. I mean, that leads us beautifully onto your book. You're mentioning all of the, oh, what would be the best term? In original peoples or indigenous peoples? What's the,
Yeah, I think Indigenous peoples is probably a good term. I mean, there are different terms used for those peoples in different parts of the world, but
yeah.
here I would say most frequently it's Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, because
Hmm.
I think it's important, isn't it, to be respectful of this subject that we're going to be talking about today. And obviously, you're in America, and we're talking predominantly a lot about America, but your book does also touch on many other cultures and the impacts that they've experienced over millennia, really, isn't it? That's how long
Hmm.
we're sort of talking of. But what sort of you had an experience that kind of led you down this path, didn't you? A realization about your own ancestors that was quite confronting, that basically sort of set you on this journey that has ultimately led to this book, which is, well, I highly recommend it. It's just beautiful, and it's really something that I think is so important for particularly people of white origin to be considering at this time.
Yeah, I have had several incidents, I would say, that kind of sparked this process of writing this book, and I never I never had a desire to write a book at all. But some things happened that I was compelled. I was compelled to do this project. And because it felt much bigger than me, I had to kind of set aside all of my insecurities and doubts
Yeah,
about my ability to do that and just do it.
yeah,
And one of the things that happened was that in on the last night of 2015, I opened a book of family genealogy that had been written by my great uncle and realized that I had ancestors who had migrated from the Scottish Highlands to North Carolina in 1739. And then that began a chain of the family receiving land grants, receiving enslaved people in a will, um, and enslaving people in Mississippi later on. And so there's something about white culture in the United States that somehow allowed me to be completely ignorant of that until I was 40 years old. And and it came as a huge shock to me because my family hadn't spoken about it. It had been sitting in the book of genealogy for a long time and no one ever talked about it. And so the fact that no one was talking about it kind of opened my eyes to there's something about the way we operate here that needs some help.
yeah.
And we need to try to do things differently. And so that's how the book started.
Yeah, I think it it is we live in a culture that's very much sort of we're focused on the future and the present, really, isn't it? And we kind of I mean there is a lot of history that has been very much written by, the patriarchy and the white patriarchy in particular, and that's what we study through school. And so it is, we do grow up in this bubble. I mean, that's a term that you use throughout your book, isn't it? Of you're popping these bubbles all the way through of like as you begin to work through this process and to really understand how you came to be in the position that you found yourself now, via all of your ancestors' journey. And I mean, it's something that I have begun to explore, and actually, my podcast has been a helpful catalyst for that. And I've been lucky to speak to some amazing people who've brought my attention towards this idea of worldviews and also the amazing wisdom that the Indigenous people have. And in your book, they generously gave you permission to share some of their wisdom and practices, didn't they? But it it is very difficult, I think, isn't it? And we have to work through a lot ourselves to actually begin to take this journey. There is a lot of trauma, and you talk particularly about the shame and guilt that you felt when you found out about that past and your ancestry.
Yeah, that was a overwhelming response that was pretty debilitating for a long time. And I must thank the forest for helping me get through that because it was almost like when I found out that information, I was not connected with any human community or space that had the capacity to hold the grief that I felt.
Yeah,
It was so immense, and many times I felt like I was grieving for many generations past who
yeah,
hadn't been able to grieve. And so I would go out into the woods and lie down in the snow and weep into the ground. And I had to do that for a few months before I could even begin to address this with other human beings.
yeah,
And then when I finally did, I was pleasantly surprised to find that people encouraged me to keep going and
yeah,
to continue looking at it and not to shrink away from it. And so it was that process of continuing that allowed that grief and shame to be metabolized and unpacked over the course of the coming years. And now I don't feel that at all. I don't feel that guilt and shame in the same way anymore. But I definitely had to work through it for years.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's that's the thing, isn't it? Is it's finding the courage to sit with some quite difficult and quite big and overwhelming emotions. And I think you also commented that like quite a lot of your sort of white should we call them relations, but it's not, not, we're not talking family, we're talking like your community, your white community around
Yeah.
you. They they weren't at the stage that they were ready to confront it either, were they? So actually, a lot of your earlier sort of conversations were quite often with actually the Indigenous people and beautiful people of color who actually sort of supported you on exploring these subjects and this topic.
That's true. They did. And that is incredibly generous.
Yeah,
And it still awes me the grace that was shown,
yeah,
truly, because, there's a lot of pain there about
yeah,
what has happened to those communities as a result of white supremacy. And there's ongoing trauma in those communities. And so I'm still blown away that people have shown this kind of generosity and kindness to, sit with someone like me and talk through things like that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's, I mean, because obviously I'm in the UK, and I think what I love about your book as well is that actually, because of your cultural lineage and ancestry, you do actually touch on things that relate to people in Europe and the UK as well. And it's it's interesting here because the the indigenous people are much more sort of removed and distant to us, I find, in my own exploration. I found it's a lot harder because we don't have these sort of communities still in place that you have in America, these indigenous people, although they've obviously been forced from their lands and they're not really where they rightfully should be, but they are, you still have these amazing little communities that you can benefit from and you can reach out to. And I found it really interesting that when you actually talked about the history of that sort of similar trauma that was inflicted on Indigenous Europeans going back millennia, and then they've carried that forward with them, very sadly, haven't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that is fascinating to me because there are so many parallels between what happened in European history at different points in time and different places, and then what happened over here. And it's in some ways, I almost think that it was like a blueprint was laid, like things were tried out and practiced on a smaller scale in Europe, and then eventually exported and magnified with unbelievable cruelty
Yeah.
in order to enact a genocide over here.
Yeah.
And also in many places throughout the
Yeah,
world.
I was going to say,
Genocide.
as you were
Yeah.
talking, I was thinking about Africa as well, where I have
Hmm.
spent a huge amount of time. I know that we've both, you've been to Africa as well, and you had a particularly moving experience in the DRC. And actually, we both mentioned our experience in Rwanda, in Kigali, and with the Genocide Museum. And I remember going there myself, and the genocide was something that's happened in my lifetime, which I think is also, massively confronting when you sit there and think about it. I'm sort of 40 years old, and you're like, this is, our lived history. This is not, ancestral. This is our experience. And I remember how confronting I found that, because I did have sort of vague memories from my early, sort of early childhood, of what happened in Rwanda, but actually when I learned a lot more about how it unfolded and how little the international community actually did to really help and protect the people of Rwanda, it was really shocking and quite confronting as well, to realize how complicit they were in allowing things and the atrocities to unfold in the way that they did. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We have this sort of, you know, romantic notion in our white culture that it's in the past. And I mean, we could obviously talk about certain current events that are unfolding, which clearly will also demonstrate that it is very much not in the past. And I think that's part of why it is so important that books like yours are coming into the world, and you are giving people the tools to start having these conversations and start doing the work to actually realize the path that has been repeated, which is what you're saying. Like when you see actually this blueprint that has repeated itself and printed itself through various points in history, it's like we need to take responsibility for it. Needs to end now and not be printed forward into the future.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things I think about often at this time. And it's interesting you mentioned the Kigali Memorial, because when I went there, I've been thinking about it often in the last couple of months. When I went there, one of my main things that just was etched into my mind, and I took it with me, was how the people were separated by the shape and sizes of their noses.
Yeah.
That's how they were classified. And that went on for a long time, for years before that genocide. And I think about that, and it's for me, it's easy to look at that and think how arbitrary that is and how silly that is. Who cares
Yeah.
what size or shape somebody's nose
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what's happening currently too. People are being separated and sorted out and demonized based on their ethnic background or their where they were born or how they look.
Or their
And
religious orientation at times as well. Yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
right. And I really hope that we, as you said, that genocide happened in our lifetime. And I really hope we can learn the lesson and not do this again.
Yeah.
And and another thing about that genocide memorial was I remember there was a separate part of the exhibit that had a little bit about various genocides throughout history, and they all followed the same path, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
They all combine the same ingredients, no matter where they've taken place in the world or when. And so, yeah, it's really made me reflect in this current time.
Yeah. I think it's It is such a, I mean, it's a very heavy subject, isn't it? And I know, there has been a rising wave of this need for awareness. That a very sort of buzzword was white privilege. I know in myself, I found that actually that word in itself was quite difficult to actually, it was almost off-putting because the word privilege is, there are, white people who are like, within the whiteness, you can talk of privilege and non-privilege, and it's difficult. People do often find that. I think that almost shuts people down sometimes, that term, doesn't it? And it's, you have to move beyond that. And but you have a few other terms that you use. One of them was white peril, which I thought was a really interesting concept that I'd never come across before. But I know it's from another author that you've worked with. But would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that term comes from a friend of mine named Calvin Terrell, who is a educator and does all kinds of speaking and consulting. And he's a black man. And I went to a workshop with him several years ago when I was in the process of writing the book and trying to sort these concepts out in my mind. And in the workshop, he talked about white peril. And he said, it's not only, he was addressing a group of white people in the workshop. He said, it's not only that you guys have privilege, it's also peril. And he started listing off examples. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is what I have been trying to pin down. And it's the idea that, you know, we all know about white privilege, and privilege benefits us unequally depending on class
Yeah.
and many other factors. But then there's a corollary to that, which is that when we are held as superior as white people across the board, when we are in a white dominant society, then we actually suffer as a result of that as well. It doesn't work for us either. Even
Yeah.
though, from all outward appearances, we may be doing the best financially and in terms of our housing and our security and our education and healthcare and all of these things, but also it's kind of like having all that privilege puts a lid on our capacity to be fully human
Yeah.
because it inhibits our ability to care and to be empathetic and to step into action to create a more equitable society. And so,
It's almost an isolationism, isn't it, as well? It's like it
yes,
keeps us separated from each other and the greater world. And I thought it was just a really fabulous reflection in your book that I thought gave this a whole nother level to this idea of things that we need to unpack as white people, really. And it was this idea of like, because obviously you talk about privilege and, the benefits of that, but this sort of was a counterpoint to that of actually the suffering that, not to, I'm struggling here to be to hold the right words for this because our language does let us down at the same time. But it makes us poorer as people in this sense that we are losing out on this amazing culture that actually that the people of color and the indigenous people have or had that was then taken away from them as well.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that sense of cultural impoverishment in my
Yeah.
own journey and just the hegemony of whiteness and how that has stripped my people and my ancestors of very rich and diverse cultures that they used to be part of and now has become kind of this blanket identity that homogenizes everybody
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then I mean another aspect of your book that you move through is how we can respectfully and humbly approach the indigenous peoples. I mean I mean obviously as we sort of walk down this journey we begin we begin to see them in many ways as actually just wealthier, really, in terms of like they have this beautiful connection with this wider web of life, and they have these rich cultural lineages and ancestors, and but at the same time they have a huge amount of trauma and pain, and it's how we can be honoring and respectful of that as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I have, some of the indigenous communities that I have visited around the United States are some of the most impoverished communities in the whole country. And yet, when I've gone there, I have perceived this incredible cultural wealth. And in many cases, I have been offered, to participate or to sit with an elder or, just to experience that. And it is such a paradox because, yeah, colonialism has impoverished these communities, and yet many of them still have intact teachings and memory and aspects of their culture and language that they are still practicing that is just so rich and
Yeah.
so beautiful. It has so much to teach and so much to offer.
Yeah, I mean, my podcast being quite, focused on the natural world and reconnecting with nature, for me in particular, they have this amazing tapestry of connection with nature, which is so lacking in our modern white Western cultures. And it is just, I think humility really is really a very important trait for us to nurture, isn't it?
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really important to go into if we are welcomed and invited into those kind of situations or communities to go in with deep humility and the understanding that there are many things that we do not understand
Yeah.
and cannot understand because we haven't been brought up in a culture like that for and not only in our own lifetimes but for many generations back we've been removed from that kind of knowing. And but I do think it's possible to go in with humility and with kindness and with a good heart and to create connections that are really important.
Yeah, and I think it because I think building these bridges is important, isn't it? Is, to I might get it wrong, but you had a lovely way of saying it in your book, and it was about asking basically what they needed from you. I think it was the sort of the general gist of it, and having, the humility to not be presumptuous of what you think they need, but to sit and offer yourself in service to them and what they need to heal their what everything that's happened to them, and hopefully sort of begin to make reparations for that as well. And that's very important. I think something that's quite often lacking in our culture, or our white culture, is this actual ability to listen to others and to hear them as well. Particularly, you had a lovely term in your book for it, I think, is witnessing, that you used, which I loved. I really thought that's a really powerful way of considering how we actually need to go and hear what is actually being said to us rather than what we think should be said to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that idea that we know best or we know what to do or we have the special tool that will fix this situation,
Yeah,
that's where we can easily fall into the white savior trap.
yeah,
And I have fallen in that trap before many times, and I've had to really reflect and pull myself out and apologize and try to do things differently. And this is a process that's ongoing for me. I'm still learning how to navigate this. Yeah,
yeah. I think I think it's we also have within our society this kind of like we have to fix things. Like,
Hmm.
and we want the answer. Like, I think it comes from our education system, and you're taught you're a good student if you can answer all of the questions, and therefore you don't want to ask a question that you don't already think you know the answer to. And I think this is, and therefore, and you want to fix people as well, because sitting in this space of brokenness without having a solution or a path out of it is incredibly uncomfortable, because we like to control things, or at least believe that we're controlling things as well. And I think that's a huge skill that we need to learn, isn't it? Is to realize that actually, you know, there isn't necessarily a way to fix it, but you can go in and help perhaps move towards things improving.
Right. That's true. I think often that, it's taken many centuries to get us to where we are now.
Yeah.
And so it will probably take many centuries to find our way out of it. And so that is a framing that helps me cope with the sense of urgency I feel inside. And that sense of urgency was instilled in me by my white culture, And so, yeah, when I feel that sense of urgency and needing to fix things coming up in me, I try to remember, it's going to take some time to unwind this, and all I can do is just show up in this moment with the best possible heart and with, trying to be generous, trying to listen, trying to really be responsive to what is being asked for and not what I think needs to happen. And it's a process of trying. And I hope that over time, in the future generations, we will this is a way of being that can be cultivated and passed forward.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Now, the other aspect of what you cover in your book and is quite important to you is that actually, well, perhaps important to you is not quite the right framing for it, so I apologize now. But you were in many ways fortunate enough to marry into a fairly wealthy family, and part of that is your responsibility of philanthropy. And I mean, I was shocked. I mean, I shouldn't really be shocked, because I do know in the context of the environment, like how little of the sort of charitable money that is donated in the UK actually goes to the environment. But I did see in the latter stages of your book, I have a little note here, and it was that only 0.04% of philanthropic dollars currently benefit Indigenous communities, and that it was only 8 to 9% that actually went to American communities of color. And I mean, that's a shocking statistic, isn't it? It's really, here we are in 2025, and this sort of injustice and the need for reparations has been on the agenda really for several decades, really. Not to put too fine a point on it, hasn't it? It's
Yeah.
been very much, and by that I mean sort of mainstream as well. Like, a lot of awareness
Mhm.
around it, and that's a really shocking statistic. And I know that you've done things and action things to try and address that yourselves, and in fact your own donations are now 90%. But it just shows the kind of scale of still the ongoing challenges that these communities face, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, that statistic is super alarming, and it speaks to me of a systemic form of bias
Yeah,
and prejudice, that these philanthropic institutions can't mobilize to
yeah,
support the communities that are most impacted. It's just kind of still astounding to me that why is it so hard to steer this ship in a better direction?
yeah, yeah,
But it speaks to me of a very long-standing, ingrained pattern and way of doing things that we have to commit to unlearning.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It is just it's startling.
Hmm.
I just don't know. But it shows, I think it shows the importance of actually, one of the central themes of my podcast is that as individuals, we aren't powerless and our voice is important. And that when we come together, when we help raise awareness, like the actions that feel small to us actually can gain momentum and make a difference. And I think the thing to take from this perhaps is once you get over that initial like awful shock is to be like, well, there is so much scope actually to support these people and these communities and provide them with the resources to help them do what they need to do.
Right, that's true. Yeah, in the United States, the movement for reparations for has been going on for generations with both Indigenous and African American communities. It's really been since the beginning of the colonial project over here that
Yeah.
those communities have been working toward reparations. And yeah, if we look to our government to make that happen, we are going to be waiting a really long
Yeah.
time. But what I came to eventually was that, just like you said, we each have the power to do something personally. And I started working on personal reparations plans with some groups that I've been co-facilitating for several years and various classes that I've been teaching. And it's a beautiful uh, process to go through making a personal reparations plan because not only is it returning, energy and time and resources to those communities, but it's also a form of healing for us.
Yeah.
And I have experienced so much unexpected joy and a feeling of liberation, really, from, embarking on that process myself.
Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it? Because you mentioned in your book how wealth becomes sort of ring fenced in within like, the white culture in particular, and it gets passed from generation to generation and is just held separate. And it is important to begin to unpack these ways that we can begin to redress some of the, I suppose, wrongs, for want of another word, of the past, and begin to at least ensure that for future generations that they have opportunities that they should have, which they currently don't have. And yeah, I mean, there are so it is a huge, which is why your book is so powerful because you take people on this journey of basically from your discovery to how you've moved through working through a lot of the emotions that you felt and came across, and then also you have amazing resources that you provide people with to learn more, but also to begin to take that journey to help create a future that's much more balanced for everyone.
That's right. There are so many incredible authors who have written about these things. And I just, in the, 9-year process of writing this book, I was so fortunate to read so many books and listen to podcasts and, sometimes take some classes with people that really broaden my perspective. And I did my best to include all of those resources in the book because I just know how valuable it was for me, and I want to share that experience with other people too.
Yeah, it is such it's a huge subject and it's a huge topic, and it's your this for some people your book might be the first time that they've actually contemplated any of this. They might not have really thought about how it's impacted them, how their lives have been impacted, how the lives of those around them have been impacted. And then to have this amazing resource that you've put together so kindly, and you've got a website that supports the book as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
Is it good? It's goodrelative.com, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have links to all of that for everyone as well, so that they can easily go and look that up and um, delve into this subject much deeper than we unfortunately have time for, because it is. I feel like we could talk for a week and still not have done justice to everything that you cover in your book, and really sort of trying to just give people an introduction to this if they've never considered it, and also where they might be able to go with it.
Mm.
I mean, some of the things that you undertook was you spend a lot of time. You created an ancestors altar, didn't you, in
hmm
your own home, and that was. Would you like to share a little bit about some of the experiences you had from doing that, and how you went about doing it as well, that might inspire other people?
Yeah. Yeah. The first ancestor altar I built, I did with instructions from a book by Yeye Louisa Tish that is called Jambalaya. And Yeye also wrote the foreword in my book and has been a mentor and a sister beside me the whole time. And and then over time, I eventually kind of streamlined it and made it a very basic universal practice. And so on my altar now is, a candle, a bowl of water, a few things that have been given to me from friends that somehow resonate with my ancestral connections and dreams that I've had. And there's a rocking chair in front of it, and that rocking chair has been passed down through my family. And so, the altar is a very simple place. Anyone who has an open corner in their home can set one up. It can be very simple and very basic. But I think the important thing is to spend time there, make offerings there, like offerings of food or flowers or herbs, and ask the ancestors to help you. And when I did that over a period of years, just incredible things happened. And sometimes they were happening at the altar where I was seeing or feeling things that were giving me insights into my lineage. Sometimes they would happen in the waking world with, books falling off the shelf right in front of me and things like that. Or, pieces of artwork or people, individuals showing up. All kinds of incredible synchronicities have happened. And I believe it's a result of that ancestral reverence and communication that happens at that altar. And some of the teachers that I've had have told me, that basically ancestors are ready to help us, but they need our consent. They
Okay.
need us to ask for their help. And so that's what I've been doing for 10 years. And it has manifested some incredible things that I never would have been able to do on my own.
I love that, and I think it's a really important practice. I mean, it sits as sort of a little bit alongside having a meditation space, doesn't it? And it's basically
Mhm.
just imprinting an area that you repeatedly visit with an intention. And I think that's a learning that we have perhaps gained from our ancestral roots as well, isn't it? It would have been an important part of Indigenous cultures around the world to have these almost sacred places, I suppose, that you went and communed with the world at large, isn't it? Really, like, this web of being that is beyond just the human physical realm that we have become so addicted to
Mhm.
in our modern white cultures. And it's actually lovely because the episode that I'm going to release before this one was with a animal communicator in Australia, and actually it was an Indigenous elder who lives on the land where her home is now, who came through and gives her advice about how she should sort of regenerate the land that she's living on, where should she plant certain trees and plants, and I think that that comes back to that reverence and humility as well, is that there are ancestors on the land as well who may not be specifically our genetic ancestors, as it were, in terms of familiar and family, but actually they are wanting to assist people who come with the right intention and heart, and they kind of need us as much as we need them, really.
Yeah, I feel that as well.
Yeah,
I feel especially connected to the ancestors of this land when I go up on the mountain here.
yeah,
hmm Can really feel them. And yeah, I've been up on that mountain and I've been talking to them and I've apologized,
yeah,
to them. And I've also asked them for their help and acknowledging, that I descend from people who came here with an agenda that was harmful in a lot of ways and asking for their help to begin, you know, undoing that harm.
yeah, yeah. It's a big, it's a huge amount to unpack, isn't it? It really is. But
hmm
actually, to realize that there are beings and people as well, in some of the people that you have worked with, who are also working for the same thing as well. I mean, you talk of one of your dear friends, Basil Braveheart, and his amazing. Was it his mother or his grandmother, Lucy, and her
His
forgiveness,
grandmother.
and their the capacity for their forgiveness is just a lesson for us all, isn't it? It truly is. It's not to expect it and of them because of everything that they have endured and suffered, but just this beautiful lesson that she imparted to him was, well, yeah, it was very touching.
Yeah, he's a 91-year-old elder, Oglala Lakota elder who lives in Pine Ridge, and he lives about 20 miles from the Wounded Knee massacre site. And his grandmother, Lucy, when he was 5 years old, started teaching him about that massacre and said, "You need to forgive the people who did that and forgive their ancestors." And that is just, that's a level of grace and forgiveness that is completely, really foreign and inaccessible to us in Western culture a lot
Yeah,
of times. It's
yeah,
just astounding.
yeah,
And so I have learned a lot from observing how Basil applies that kind of grace and forgiveness to situations that are unforgivable in many ways. And yeah, just trying to emulate that. I mean, I think of there are other people around the world who are luminaries who have talked about a similar type of forgiveness that is just astounding.
yeah, yeah,
And I just wonder, what would happen around the world if we could begin applying that on a mass scale.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, that kind of unconditional love. And for me, the unconditional love and forgiveness also goes hand in hand with reparations.
yeah,
They're kind of one and the same, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. And I think the importance of apology as well. I think you worked with Basil to, in a beautiful ceremony that he brought together and initiated, and you were able to assist him in, and that very much had a focus on apology, didn't it?
Yeah, that was an incredible gathering that happened in 2019, and it was very interesting because there were about 200 people who came, and within that group, there were matched sets. So, for example, there was a Palestinian man, a woman who was descended from an SS officer in Nazi Germany, as well as someone who was descended from the last surviving member of the family that had all been killed during the Holocaust. So we had constellations of people like that from different, human rights issues and conflicts and
Yeah,
wars all around the world. And it was amazing to watch them come together and acknowledge these legacies that they hold that are like two sides of the same coin, victim and perpetrator,
yeah,
and then to watch them offer prayers of apology and forgiveness and say, we need to come together in unity now. And so it was an incredible thing to witness,
yeah.
truly.
Yeah, it it is amazing. I think I mean someone that I've followed who does some incredible work about like sort of peace intentions and sort of coming together in prayer and intention, and it's the ripples that can transcend out from that is not to be underestimated. And they her name is Lynn McTaggart. Sorry, I was struggling to remember it. She has some amazing work, and she's a scientist, and it's very much science based in how she sort of tries to quantify the impact of these gatherings of people coming together with an intention for peace and healing and apology and forgiveness. And it it shouldn't be underestimated. And I think in our culture we do underestimate it. And I think writing, I mean, you talked about writing an apology to someone else, didn't you? And it's very personal and private and everything, but it we sometimes underestimate the importance of a really genuine, heartfelt apology. And even, it's, and you talk as well, something that's very important is about being careful where you sort of give that as well. And sometimes, and honoring that actually it might not be appropriate to give it to another person who, because you might trigger feelings and things that they're not able at that time to deal with. And actually, sometimes it's more personal, and it's about sort of putting that into the universe rather than sort of bestowing it on another person and expecting a reaction from them.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there is a risk with apology that it can become a performance
Yeah,
and or become coercive
yeah,
somehow, where
yeah,
you expect some kind of response or you expect to be absolved
yeah,
and publicly, forgiven.
yeah,
And so because of that trickiness around it, um, the people I co-facilitate groups with and we have decided to use apology in a way that's ritualized as a prayer.
yeah,
And instead of spreading that out to other human beings, because you know, there's a lot of wounding
yeah,
in in our world right now, and it's easy to create more harm
yeah,
inadvertently. And
yeah.
so um yeah, so we do it as a prayer and we do it in a ritualized way.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Would you share a little bit about how you sort of undertake that in case any listeners feel like they would like to sort of perhaps undertake that themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Our process is pretty simple. We start with asking people to really, well, first of all, they investigate into their family stories and
Yeah,
they think about what their family carries, what has happened in the family. What does the family have a history of harm in the way of colonial actions or massacre or war or things like that? And then if there are things like that, we ask them to, or maybe even if there aren't, even if they do not have known circumstances like that in the family, but they do have the fact of being a white-bodied person that has assimilated into a white supremacist
Yeah.
culture, even that is grounds for, this process to take place. So we ask them to really go into their heart, to meditate, and to write a prayer on paper. And, sometimes it can be very short, it can be a poem or, a few words. Some people end up writing 11 or 12 pages
Yeah.
and everything is okay, everything in between. And then we ask them to fold the prayer up and put it inside a piece of cotton fabric with some plants that are important to them, to their spiritual tradition or to their ancestors. For many of us in Europe, you could include mugwort
Yeah.
or lavender or rosemary,
Yeah.
things like that. Um, and then we fold it all up and tie it with cotton string, and then we light a sacred fire, meaning that we light a fire with an intention of gratitude and of honoring the fire. And then after the fire has burned a little while and has burned down to coals, we put that prayer bundle in the coals so that the smoke can go up to the cosmos and send that message.
Yeah.
And it's been I've been co-facilitating this for 5 years, and it is remarkable to watch what happens to people when they do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oftentimes there is resistance and they're afraid to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then many times when they push through that resistance and do it anyway, things start to open up. And that sense of grief and guilt and shame starts to get more permeable. And then they are free. They are free
Yeah.
to begin moving into reparative action.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was thinking the other side of the coin, of course, of that is forgiveness. And you could probably quite easily follow a similar idea for offering up forgiveness of potentially your ancestors if they've done something, that like your own ancestors, who benefited from the land grants and yeah, and had slaves themselves, but also, I guess, perhaps if you were of a community that was actually on the other side of this and was really, persecuted and harmed by this, that sense of being able to work through that yourself in this ritualized, personal, private way would perhaps help with dealing with some of the emotions as well, and some of the trauma, because I think, it's something that I have addressed a lot on my podcast is this the fact that we are a very traumatized world. We're a very traumatized culture. Trauma is has a huge impact on those that care about the environment. They're often traumatized by the state of the environment. And so I have addressed sort of ideas of PTSD and somatic healing and movement and song, and there's lots of things and resources there. But it is this generational trauma is an important facet for us to be working through and to be doing our part to heal from for previous generations, for our own generation, and for future generations.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I see that as well. And you're right. These prayers I'm talking about, they do include forgiveness prayers.
Yeah.
It's apology and forgiveness together. It's kind of like, a continuum. It's
Yeah.
it's all they're all connected. And and to your point too, I think sometimes people, the most important prayer that has to go into that bundle is a prayer of self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because many of us are really heartbroken
Yeah.
about the way things have gone and the role that we're playing, like what you're referencing with the environmental abuse. all of us are taking part in systems that are harming the earth
Yeah.
right now, and we don't really know how to stop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's often a component as well.
Yeah. Oh, Hilary, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you. I know we're sort of probably getting to about an hour, and whilst I don't want to, I feel like I have to wrap up a little bit. But
Yeah.
I mean, you've given us some amazing words of wisdom. You've given us some beautiful tools that we can begin this journey if we haven't, or we can continue it if we have started it already. I would definitely recommend to people to go out and get your book. It's in print now. Becoming a Good Relative, Calling White Settlers Towards Truth, Healing and Repair, because it's a beautiful companion and guide as you undertake this in your own personal way. It's very, very readable, very approachable, and I would definitely recommend for people to go and get that. But as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you feel on your heart, any wisdom that you would like to share for people who might be undertaking this journey or interested in what they can do, and how, maybe even how that they can start trying to sort of help provide solutions for the future?
Yeah. You know, I think what I would say is that I am not special at
Yeah.
all. And I really believe that everyone has a pathway into this type of work that is uniquely their own. And we all have circumstances in our ancestry and our lineage. We all have circumstances and gifts and assets in our present daily lives that can come together uniquely to combine into a path that is uniquely designed for each one of us. And I really believe that each one of us holds a piece of the puzzle. And this is the little piece that I'm holding, but I believe anybody can pick up a piece of this puzzle and make it their own. And so I just want to encourage people to begin and have
Yeah.
courage,
Yeah.
have courage and perseverance, because this is not something that we can wrap up in a 6-week workshop. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is it is a lifetime journey, but it's extremely rewarding and healing, um, and it's full of joy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think sometimes we make things very complicated, don't we? And actually, like, we forget the simplicity of actually just taking that first step and just beginning. I'm a
Yeah,
recovering perfectionist, and I like to, have my ducks in a row and neatly aligned, and having researched everything before I start to
right.
guarantee success. And actually, this is not something that, is about success or failure. It's about actually just beginning. It's about, stepping up and taking part and becoming, responsible for your own part and what you play and your contribution to the whole. And if it's all right with you, I remembered that in your closing words, which is written by your dear friend that you mentioned earlier, like her first sentence in that, which just really touched me, was, I believe the greatest trick to befool humankind is that we are separate, that we are at odds, that there isn't enough, that one must be above, that there is a below. In fact, there is no above, there is no below, no hierarchy, just one great circle. And
Mm.
I just thought that was just her. I mean, I loved her contribution to your book. It's incredibly valuable as well. But I thought that was a beautiful way to end this, to remember that we aren't separate either from
Mhm.
each other in the human world or from the greater non-human world that we are also an intrinsic part of. And it's important for us to have these less comfortable conversations, but also realize that there is great healing, great value, and great importance in the work that we need to undertake as individuals to play our part in healing the world, both culturally in community and also our natural environment. So I honestly, Hilary, I thank you so much for the time and effort and work that you've put into this. I thank your ancestors for coming forward and supporting you, and also the amazing people who've contributed to your book, the beautiful people from who have suffered, the Indigenous people who've offered you their wisdom, the original people of America, and also your dear friends of colour who have graced you with both their compassion, forgiveness, and also guidance on your journey. And yeah, I just would like to take a moment to thank them for everything that they've contributed in helping us as white people to try and move forward in a way that is of service to them in the future, and go some way to correct what has happened in the past and hopefully prevent more of it happening in the future. But it has been an absolute honour, and I hope very much that I will also get the chance to speak to you again, because you are a beautiful person, you have so much humility but also so much wisdom to share in what you have gathered on your journey and can offer to others. So thank you, Hilary, for everything you're doing to help us with this journey forward in this world to make it a little bit brighter and better in the future.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It's just been a joy talking to you and realizing how much we have in common too.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.